In almost 2 decades of seeing women in my office, there is a phrase I hear with a frequency that worries me. It doesn't come at the beginning of the appointment. It comes at the end, when the patient is already standing up, hand on the doorknob, almost leaving. It is right there, in that last second of courage, that she turns around and says softly, "Doctor, I don't feel anything anymore. It's not about pain. It's not about illness. It's about desire. It's about the silent disappearance of something she can't even explain properly, but that is destroying her marriage from the inside. I need to talk about this," is a frightening portrait of negligence. Women going through menopause are losing their libido in a devastating way, and most of the time, no one explains why to them. No one sits down, looks them in the eye, and says, "This has a cause, this has a name, and this has a solution." What they hear, when they hear anything at all, is "it's part of it, it's your age, try to relax." And I say this with the responsibility of someone who has heard these phrases, repeated by colleagues in the profession, who should know better. What happens to the female body during menopause goes far beyond what most people imagine. When estrogen levels begin to drop, and this drop can start years before the last period, in the phase we call perimenopause, the entire brain undergoes a silent reorganization. Dopamine receptors, which are responsible for the feeling of pleasure and anticipation, start functioning differently. Serotonin, which regulates mood and well-being, fluctuates unpredictably. Female testosterone, which few people know exists and which plays a fundamental role in desire, also progressively decreases. The result of this is not just the loss of sexual desire. It's a complete transformation in how this woman experiences pleasure, connection, and intimacy. And the cruelest part is that this transformation happens in silence. I have treated women who spent months, some even years, believing they were depressed. Others thought they had stopped loving their husbands. Others felt so much guilt that they began to avoid any kind of physical contact, from a hug to holding hands, because they were afraid it would create an expectation they couldn't meet. And at no point did anyone tell these women that their bodies were going through a profound hormonal change, and that it wasn't their fault. I will repeat this because it needs to be said clearly. It is not her fault. When libido disappears in menopause, it's not because the woman decided to stop feeling. It's not because she doesn't love anymore. It's not because the marriage failed. It's because there is a biochemical cascade happening inside her body that is literally rewriting how her brain processes desire. Researchers at the University of Melbourne followed women through the menopausal transition for over 10 years, and the data is unequivocal. The decline in sexual function during this phase is predominantly physiological. It shows up in tests. It shows up in hormone levels. It is real, it is documented, and it is treatable. But here is where the story gets more painful. Because while this woman is trying to understand what happened to her body, there is someone on the other side of the bed who is also suffering. The partner, who in most cases has no idea what menopause is beyond hot flashes, begins to feel the distance, and he interprets this distance with the emotional tools he has. He thinks she doesn't want him anymore. He thinks he did something wrong. He thinks there's someone else, or worse, he thinks the love is gone. I have seen couples arrive at my office on the brink of divorce, 20, 25 years of marriage, children raised together, a whole life built together. And when I investigated the root of the estrangement, it wasn't betrayal, it wasn't disrespect, it wasn't incompatibility, it was menopause. It was the lack of information about what was happening to that woman's body, and their mutual inability to verbalize what they were feeling. Silence in these cases acts like a slow poison. It corrodes from the inside without leaving visible marks. The woman stays quiet because she feels ashamed. The man stays quiet because he is afraid of seeming insensitive. And between these two silences, the marriage empties out night after night. The touch that was once natural becomes uncomfortable. The look of complicity becomes distant. The bed that was once a refuge becomes a territory of anxiety. And it was precisely because I saw so many patients, so many couples, going through this, that I started looking for answers that went beyond the obvious. Because conventional medicine, most of the time, treats menopause like a checklist. Standard hormone replacement, an anti-anxiety pill if necessary, and come back in 6 months. But female desire is infinitely more complex than a prescription can solve. It involves hormones, yes, but it also involves neurology, psychology, emotional history, relationship quality, self-esteem, and a series of factors that need to be looked at together. There are approaches that most doctors don't even mention in routine appointments. Female testosterone, for example, when administered in a personalized way with careful monitoring, has shown results that I see happen in my own office. Women who had accepted the loss of desire as something definitive began to feel real changes, not instant, not miraculous, but real. There are also specific nutritional adjustments that directly influence the production of neurotransmitters linked to pleasure. There are body and emotional reconnection practices based on neuroscience that go far beyond the generic advice found out there. There are natural compounds, phytoestrogens, adaptogens, micronutrients, that in recent clinical studies have shown significant effects on female sexual response. And it was precisely because I saw so many women suffering unnecessarily that I sought to gather the most relevant information on this subject. Something that could genuinely make a difference in the lives of those going through this. I left it all accessible in the first link in the description and in the pinned comment of this video. But I need to be honest about something that goes beyond biochemistry, because there is an emotional dimension to this story that no hormone alone can fix. When a woman loses her libido in menopause, she is not just dealing with a bodily change. She is facing an identity crisis. Everything she knew about herself as a woman, her energy, her sensuality, the way she connects with her own body, is being rewritten without her permission. And when this rewriting happens in the dark, without information, without support, without an understanding partner, she can feel broken. She can feel like less of a woman. She can feel alone in a crowd. I have seen patients cry in the office, not because of physical pain, but because of this loneliness. The loneliness of feeling that something has died inside them and that no one around them notices. Or worse, that they notice but don't know what to do. Researchers from the Gottman Institute, a global reference in long-term relationship studies, have documented something I consider essential. Couples who manage to turn this crisis into a conversation, who find the courage to say, "I am not okay and I need you to know," not only survive menopause, but build a deeper intimacy than they had before. Because true intimacy is not sustained solely by physical desire. It is sustained by vulnerability, by the ability to show your wound and trust that the other person will embrace you instead of judging. And here is something I make a point of telling every patient of mine, and that I now say to you. Menopause does not erase the capacity to feel pleasure. It changes the path to it. What worked before might not work now. The stimuli change, the timing changes, the way the body responds changes, but the capacity is there, intact, waiting to be rediscovered through a different route. I have seen women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s rediscover a connection with their own bodies that they didn't even have when they were younger. Not the same as before, different, more conscious, more intentional, deeper. The problem was never menopause itself. The problem has always been the silence around it. The way society treats this phase as a decline instead of a transition. The way doctors' offices rush a conversation that should take hours. The way couples are left alone to navigate something no one prepared them to face. Studies from the Harvard School of Public Health have shown that women who receive adequate information about the hormonal transformations of menopause and who have access to integrative care, combining hormonal, nutritional, emotional, and relational support, show significant improvement not only in sexual function, but in their overall quality of life. I am not talking about miracles. I am talking about science applied with humanity. The female brain is neuroplastic. It adapts, it rebuilds pathways, it rediscovers pleasure when given the right conditions to do so. There is a path that has transformed how many of my patients deal with this phase, and the results I have been seeing motivated me to make this accessible to more women. It's right there in the pinned comment and in the first link in the description for whoever needs it. What I want most to be clear after all this is a simple thing, but one that changes everything. You are not alone. What you are feeling, or what someone you love is feeling, is not weakness. It is not the end. It is not something to just accept and move on from. It is a real change in the body that deserves real attention, real investigation, and real care. And when that attention arrives, when the right information meets the right woman at the right time, the transformation that happens is something I have the privilege of witnessing every week in my office. Love doesn't die when desire changes form. Love dies when silence occupies the space that should be filled by truth. And today, right here, that silence has been broken. If this made sense to you, if these words touched something you felt but couldn't explain, I ask you, subscribe to this channel, because this topic doesn't end here. There is much more that needs to be said, many more truths that need to leave the doctor's office and reach those who need to hear them. Turn on notifications to follow the upcoming videos. And if you know someone who is going through this in silence, share it. Because sometimes a single piece of information at the right time is what separates suffering from transformation. And transformation, I can tell you with the certainty of someone who has seen it happen hundreds of times, is absolutely possible.